Welcome to another episode of the Catholic Novel. Today we're going to talk about John Hassler's Dear James. I think John Hassler was a terrific novelist. I remember when I heard that he had retired, I was very saddened, and I was even more saddened when I heard that he had died. For some reason, who knows what that reason is, while he was a favorite among critics, he never got the national reputation that he really deserved. A priest friend of mine who's been watching these shows, when we first started out, said, when you've got to cover John Hassler. And I said, no, we have it planned, we're going to. It's just that he's a little bit down the road in these. Now, in preparing for this show, I was looking up some old reviews, and one commentator made a statement, something like this. John Hassler tried to create a make-believe geographical entity called Staggerford, and he used it in a number of his novels. I thought that was so clever. Apparently he was trying to do what Faulkner did with a county down south, a make-believe county. Anyway, this critic said, in this next novel you'll meet a number of people whom you met in an earlier novel, if you care. If something like that, if you really care. It was kind of it was a negative comment, and I was amazed. Because I think one of Hassler's strongest points is creating characters. They're so real. They're real in two ways. They remind you of people you know. Okay, that's the most obvious one. But they're also real because they're so believable in the plot. So, just a terrific writer. Now, in preparing for this show, at the university, at St. John's University, I was teaching Plato. And for those of you who haven't studied Plato, Plato believed that there were these eternal forms, truth, goodness, and beauty. And once we saw them, once we came to understand them, we had to spread the word. And I was thinking something like that has happened to me with the Catholic novel. I think I mentioned on an earlier show, I read my first Catholic novel in high school, and then in college I started reading Mauriac and War and Graham Greene, and I just got hooked. But like Plato said, once you know this, you have to spread the word. I had to tell other people. And even as a college student, I was telling people, friends of mine who were older than I, you got to read Graham Greene, you got to read Even the War. I was a little stunned that they hadn't read them because they'd all gone to Catholic colleges. But I was even more stunned they had never heard of them. And that was really mysterious to me, okay? And here we are years later, and I'm still pushing the Catholic novel. Now this one, Dear James, is a really good one. In thinking about it, I came across two quotations that I'd like to use right now. One is from the novelist John Updike, and it's a very brief quotation. He says, surely one of the novel's habitual aims is to articulate morality, to sharpen the reader's sense of vice and virtue. And I believe that, and I don't think it's proselytizing. I think if somebody writes a piece of literature, that person's philosophy of person, that person's philosophy of the meaning of life and so on, it's going to come across. I've come to believe very deeply that people write literature because they want to communicate. They think they've got something to say and they want to say it. As a matter of fact, Walker Percy actually said that. He said, I think I've got something to say, and I'm going to say it. So John Hassler, I think, had quite a bit to say. So the first quote that I wanted to give you was that one by Updike. Now this one is from the novelist Anthony Burgess. And here's what he says. As novels are about the ways in which human beings behave, they tend to imply a judgment of behavior, which means that the novel is what the symphony or the painting or the sculpture is not, namely a form steeped in morality. We still cannot prevent a moral attitude from creeping into our purely aesthetic assessment of a book. I think he's right. I think every serious novel has got some kind of philosophy it's presenting. Now, you may remember we talked about The Green Journey. Dear James is the sequel to that, the follow-up on that. In The Green Journey, Agnes McGee, who had taught for almost 50 years in a Catholic grammar school, is traveling to Ireland, has developed a pen-pal relationship with a friend in Ireland, person in Ireland, whom she's never met. When she goes to Ireland, she finds out it's a priest, and she's extremely offended that he never told her that he was a priest in their letters. So she's really refuses to forgive him. Dear James picks up that she has forgiven him, and their relationship develops further and further. Now, ordinarily, I would just say, you know, they have a deep, deep friendship, but I think it's okay to say they obviously love one another. There's nothing immoral about it. There's nothing untoward about it. You know, he's not tempted to violate his vows. She's not tempted to commit some serious sin. And Hasse does this so beautifully, so subtly. And I'm amazed at it. You know, how, as I've said before on this show, I'm always amazed that lay people, laymen or lay women who write novels have been success in their attempts at entering into the conscience and consciousness of a priest. And the priest in Dear James, this Irish priest, is just a terrific human being. So he and Agnes make up, they exchange letters. Now, Agnes's lifelong friend is a neighbor, Lillian, and she's really a good person, but she's rather superficial. And her daughter is Imogene, and she is really a mean person, okay? She doesn't like Agatha, and she's going to do what she can to make life difficult for her. Well, in her letters to the priest, nothing very serious, but Agatha has sort of pointed out some of the mistakes, some of the quirks of the people in Staggeford. And Imogene spreads the word that she has said these things. It's all gentle stuff, but all of a sudden this icon, who is, you know, everybody admired, they're all angry at her. And as the novel develops, Agatha is on this committee, the library committee, and they have to pick a new librarian. And Imogene wants that job very, very much. But everybody figures there's no way she's going to get it because of the job she has done on Agatha, okay? And then in a very lovely several scenes, Agatha, it reminds me of, you know, what Pope Francis says God is like. God is mercy. Agatha recommends Imogene, and Imogene gets the job. And Imogene can't understand this at all. But it's so beautifully done that though she's deeply hurt, Agatha, she's able to transcend all that and do an unselfish act of kindness. Now, I have one thing from, I've singled out one paragraph around the middle of the book. Agatha is thinking about her relationship with this priest, Father James. And this is what Hasse writes. Agatha uttered a quiet little laugh, and James was pleased to have caused it. But her amusement was quickly dispelled. She was once again at the height overlooking Assisi and asking God to explain the paradox of a woman like herself, churchly and honorable, feeling as if she were married to a priest. Watching the smile fade and her expression darken, James wondered what unwelcome idea had suddenly come into her head. Her eyes, unseeing, were fixed on the wrought ironwork of the balcony. Something told him not to attempt following her to the private place she had gone. So she's getting scruples. She wonders about this relationship. But let me assure you, it's not only okay, it's an absolutely beautiful relationship. Now, as a priest, I think I always have to be afraid of proselytizing. I'm promoting the Catholic novel, and the reason I'm doing it is this. You and I live in a rather secular society, and anything we can find that supports our faith is great. So reading theology books, wonderful. Reading philosophy books, wonderful. I think reading the Catholic Catechism is wonderful. But reading stories have a unique kind of a power. If the story tells us something deep about human nature or something very mysterious about God, this is a plus. And I say to a number of my friends, I often ask them, what are you reading? And if they ever say, well, I'm just reading junk, I try to say, well, look, as long as you're reading, you know, you don't have to read Dostoevsky every night. You don't have to read Shakespeare every night. But why not read something good? And there's stories. So when I teach the Catholic novel at St. John's University, I tell students, okay, there's a great deal of reading. You know, and if you don't think you want to do it or you don't think you can do it, drop the course right away. But remember this, you're not reading textbooks. These are stories, so that, and they're good stories. So they should grab your interest immediately. And if you stay with it, I think not only will you get credit for the course, but you'll also, I think, deepen your understanding, not only of the characters in the novel, but if the really great novels will help you to deepen your understanding of yourself. And that is a big, big plus. I mentioned that I was stunned that this critic, sort of dismissed Hassler. No, my opinion is he was right up there with the best of them. He's so good. He's one of those novelists I wish I could have met. I wish I could have sat down with him and talked to him, how did you think of this, and how did you think of that, and what's the theme of this novel, and so on. He is right up there with the giants, in my opinion. The Catholic novel is not a tract, telling you how to live. It's a story, but in that story, the great writers convey very important values. Flannery O'Connor said once that the people who are frightened don't read novels. They not only don't write novels, but they don't read novels. Why? Because they will be challenged by it. They'll be challenged by the great novels. These series of shows on the Catholic novel, for me, is a labor of love. I get a chance to look back at favorite novels I have, and I get a chance to try to tell other people about it. So in a sense, it's like going back 60 years to college when I was trying to tell my friends to read these novels. Now I'm trying to tell the television audience. You don't have to read all of them. But if you've enjoyed these shows, you should single out a couple of them. I think this would be a very good one. I think a really special one, and I think I've mentioned this already on the show, is Edge of Sadness. My appreciation of that novel has increased terrifically. So I've read 6 or 7 of Hassler's novels. They're all good. Some are better than others, but none of them are poor. That critic was really off base in suggesting that the characters in this novel aren't interesting. No, they're tremendously interesting because they represent the human mystery. So if you're looking for something good to read, try John Hassler's Dear James.